The Hook Island Sea Monster. On December 12, 1964, a French photographer, Robert Le Serec, took his family and a friend boating in the Stonehaven Bay near Hook Island, Australia. They were having an ordinary day until Robert's wife spotted something large and strange resting in the water. Robert would later state, quote, "It was only when we got to within 20 feet of the serpent that we could see its head clearly. The head was large, about 4 feet from top to bottom, with jaws about 4 feet wide. The lower jaw was flat like that of a sandfish. The skin was smooth but rather dull, brownish-black in color. The eyes seemed pale green, almost white. The skin looked more like that of a shark than an eel. There were no apparent scales, nor did we see any parasites around. We supposed the flexible tail would have shaken any off. There were no fins or spines, nor were there any apparent breathing openings, although there must have been some. Perhaps we didn't see them because our attention was focused mainly on the creature's menacing mouth, the inside of which was whitish. The teeth appeared to be small. A fragment of some dark substance hung from the upper row of teeth, possibly a fish. As the monster was lying on the sandy bottom, we could not see the color of its belly. The creature was about 90 feet long. Behind the head, the body was about 2 feet 4 inches thick and remained that way for about 25 feet. Then it gradually tapered into a whip-like tail. The general color of the body was black, with 1 foot wide brownish rings every 5 feet, the first starting just behind the head. The skin was smooth but dull." Unquote. To the alleged witnesses, the creature resembled a gigantic tadpole. Through the water, they thought they could see 2 dull white spots on the side of its head, which they assumed to be the creature's eyes. Robert noted a pale patch near the creature's tail and suggested that perhaps it was injured and had no choice but to rest in the bay. Robert took multiple photos of the strange creature, though only one has seen widespread distribution. Robert and his friend decided to get in the water to get a better look at the creature, but as they swam closer, the creature reportedly lifted its head and opened its mouth. This frightened the 2 men enough that they didn't want to get any closer to the creature. They got back out of the water and continued watching it until it swam off. A few months later, the March 1965 issue of Everyone magazine was published, containing Robert's story and the photos. This story soon caught the attention of prominent cryptozoologists at the time, such as Ivan Sanderson and Bernard Heuvelmans. After reading Robert's account, Heuvelmans thought that if the creature was real, it could be, quote, "some kind of gigantic eel-like coelacanth," unquote, possibly related to sharks or rays. Sanderson later suggested that the Hook Island serpent could be a giant form of swamp eel. However, swamp eels are native to South and Central America. However, the 2 cryptozoologists became suspicious of Robert and decided to do some digging on him. According to Heuvelmans, Robert's friends in France claimed that he told them he was planning a money-making scheme involving a sea serpent. He also found that Robert, quote, "had left unpaid creditors in France and did not seem very trustworthy," unquote, leading him to believe that the photos were most likely hoaxed. Other researchers reported that Robert was actually wanted by Interpol. Sanderson suggested that the serpent could have been a plastic bag used by the US Navy for experiments in towing petrol, possibly a deflated skyhook balloon or a roll of cloth or plastic. This case appears to be a well-done hoax, in my opinion. Orange alligator. This entry refers to several sightings of what appear to be alligators with orange skin. A now infamous photo which was taken by Sylvia Mythen in Venice, Florida, is the most well-known proof of these alligators. Similar orange alligators were also sighted in South Carolina. Could this be a new evolutionary adaptation for a creature which has been unchanged for millions of years? According to Florida Fish and Wildlife official Gary Morse, this isn't the case. Quote, "The official opinion from our alligator experts is that this alligator is not naturally orange. We believe that it's orange from paint, stain, iron oxide, or some other element in the environment that has left a coating on the animal, making it appear orange," unquote. And you can sort of see this in some of the photos as well, where the alligator's natural color is seen coming through the orange. David Lucas of the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources stated that the color could simply be rust from drainage pipes. Quote, "During the winter, the alligators like to dig in and find a place to hibernate. It is possible that some end up near drainage pipes that have rusty metal pieces inside. So basically, they marinate in rust all winter, and this stains them," unquote. Rather than being a unique type of alligator, these creatures are merely coated with rust, probably lowering their lifespan. Sewer alligators. There have been long-standing rumors and urban legends going back farther than you might expect about alligators lurking in the New York City sewer system. Reportedly, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, wealthy families were sometimes known to purchase exotic pets such as alligators before eventually discarding them when they get too big to handle. In the 1930s, mail-order alligators became somewhat of a small-time national craze. Allegedly, many buyers of these alligators would eventually dump their pet gators in the river or flush them down the toilet, where they would find themselves in the sewer. In 1932, a party formed determined to hunt down the creatures after two boys captured a small alligator in the Bronx River. Police hunted the creatures to no avail, as the alligator was said to be another escaped pet. On the early morning of February 9, 1935, teens in East Harlem were shoveling snow into the storm drain when they spotted a huge alligator in the sewer. The teens managed to lasso the gator and lifted it up to the surface. The creature weighed 125 pounds and was roughly 8 feet long. They marveled at the huge captive creature before it tried snapping at the teens, who promptly beat it to death with their shovels. The newspaper article speculated that the gator must have escaped from a passing steamer in the East River before finding its way into the sewer. This incident has actually been memorialized by the city of New York, as February 9th is Alligators in the Sewers Day. Perhaps the most well-known of these witnesses to sewer alligators was Teddy May, a New York City superintendent of sewers. Mr. May's experiences were written about in the 1959 book by Robert Daly, The World Beneath the City, and later by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Meyer Berger in 1954. Teddy May didn't believe his inspectors when they described to him a huge albino alligator that they saw in the sewer. They even described seeing entire colonies of alligators. Despite how unbelievable their reports were, Mr. May decided to search for himself, reportedly stating that he was going to, quote, "prove to yous guys that there ain't no alligators in my sewer," unquote. May then ventured into the sewer, armed with nothing but a flashlight. As he walked through the cold, dark corridors, the beam of his flashlight illuminated something. May witnessed multiple albino alligators, roughly 2 feet long. May retreated, shocked. He soon ordered his men to arm themselves, and together they hunted the gators down. They flooded the side tunnels in the sewers to flush the saurians out into the open, where they used rifles and poison to allegedly exterminate the creatures. May had no idea how the gators got into the sewer. He guessed that someone or perhaps a group of people were responsible for dumping the gators. May's testimony, though it could have been exaggerated, was never doubted or contradicted by anyone as far as I can see. So, is there a breeding population of alligators in the New York City sewers? No, it's extremely improbable, and really there's no data to suggest this is the case. The New York City Department of Environmental Protection stated that there is no official record of alligators in the city's sewer system. In fact, the sewer's low temperatures and high levels of bacteria would make it very difficult for alligators to survive very long. Alligators are, of course, cold-blooded creatures, requiring warmth to survive, and are not native to New York in the first place. Florida, unsurprisingly, has had a few sewer saurian sightings over the years, as that state actually has native alligators. In 2023, a video was captured of a Florida alligator tearing a metal fence with its claws. There was an incident in 2005 where an animal trapper caught an alligator which was in fact dwelling in the sewer. The trapper was apparently aware of these sewer alligators and claimed that the alligators can access the sewer with ease as the sewers often drain into Florida's swamps. These sightings continue to crop up over and over again. The urban legends really only add the aspects of gigantism or large breeding populations and colonies of alligators in the sewers. The colossal squid. Throughout all of human history, there have been legends of sea monsters, vicious aquatic creatures of gargantuan proportions. One such sea monster was finally identified by Western science roughly 100 years ago. The colossal squid was discovered in 1925 when British zoologist Guy Coburn-Robson found a partial specimen in the stomach of a sperm whale. Averaging at a length of 39 to 46 feet, the colossal squid is the world's largest squid species, as well as the world's largest known invertebrate. The colossal squid has eyes larger than any other known organism. They are known to inhabit the Antarctic Ocean. It's easy to imagine how the sighting of a colossal squid inspired sea monster legends in the past. If you were a sailor a little over 100 years ago, the colossal squid was still a legendary beast, incomprehensible and terrifying. But today, that sea monster is known to be merely part of our natural world. How many other cryptids and entities on this iceberg may one day be classified and categorized scientifically, crossing over from the realm of myth and fleeting eyewitness accounts into scientific fact? Pukwudgie. The Pukwudgie is a type of legendary little person from Native American folklore, particularly in the New England area. The word can be translated to little wild man of the woods that vanishes. Pukwudgies are not believed to be creatures, but a civilized race of little people organized into tribal hierarchies. The Pukwudgie is thought to be only one type of little person, though they are known to be particularly malevolent and dangerous. They are sometimes considered to be nature spirits and are known to possess magical powers. Like the elves, fairies, and little people of Europe, Pukwudgies are known to utilize poison arrows. They are said to have the ability to conjure fire and disappear at will. They are shapeshifters, capable of taking on any form they choose. They actually have a lot in common with European tales of elves. The true form of the Pukwudgie is said to be 2 to 3 feet tall, resembling a half-human, half-troll with gray skin and quills going down its back. Sometimes they are described as small humans. Other times, they are said to be covered entirely in thick fur. According to some Native American legends, Pukwudgies were once benevolent beings, but are now hostile and dangerous to humans. According to some of these legends, anyone who angered a Pukwudgie would be tormented by them. Pukwudgies were said to be tricksters accused of kidnapping people, stalking them, and following them to cause trouble. They were known to be instigators, often using their magic and trickery to pit humans against one another. Though the Pukwudgie is a creature from Native American folklore, there are people in the modern era who believe they have encountered Pukwudgies, as surprising as that may sound to some people. The Freetown State Forest in Ohio is known to be a prominent hotspot for sightings of strange creatures, UFOs, and orbs. The forest is also known for a number of unexplained disappearances, as well as reports of dark, occult activity. Several people have claimed that they have encountered creatures in the Freetown State Forest, which they believe to be Pukwudgies. Several of these witness accounts have been detailed in books regarding the paranormal and the anomalous, such as Dark Woods, Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest. One such witness, a woman named Joanne, was walking her dog, Sid, through the Freetown State Forest one Saturday morning in April. It was cold that morning as Joanne walked down one of the paths holding Sid's leash. Seemingly out of the blue, Sid appeared anxious and began straying from the path, leading Joanne deeper into the woods. Eventually, Joanne both lost her grip on Sid's leash and lost sight of her companion. She began calling his name and whistling for him as she forced her way through the vegetation. Suddenly, she saw something which made her freeze on the spot. Sid was lying completely flat in the leaves, motionless. She then noticed that, only 10 feet away from her dog, was a bizarre humanoid being holding out his hand and staring at Sid. The being, which Joanne likened to a troll, had pale gray skin and hair on its head and arms. Its torso appeared to make up the majority of its body, and its legs were small and short. Its stomach slouched over its waist, nearly reaching the creature's knees. Its eyes were a striking deep green. The creature had bizarre large lips and a snout similar to a canine's. Joanne states that, although she is unsure exactly how or why, she had the impression that this being was male. It turned its gaze towards Joanne, while remaining expressionless. She had the sense that perhaps the being was stunned to see her, or stunned that she could see him. She felt frozen to the spot, like she had the wind taken out of her lungs. Quote, "It stood there and just watched me. It was like he was sizing me up, trying to decide what to do." Unquote. After a seemingly eternal moment, Sid began to move again and started running back to the path. Joanne quickly followed Sid and began trying to calm her dog. Though the entire encounter took place in roughly 30 seconds, Joanne was thoroughly disturbed. She just wanted to get out of the forest and far away from that being. Quote, "I didn't go back to see if it was still there. I knew it was. It wasn't scared of me, and it didn't look like it was going to run away." The encounter is still burned into Joanne's mind in vivid detail over 10 years later. On 3 separate instances since the initial encounter, Joanne has reportedly woken up to see the being staring at her through her bedroom window, which lines up almost exactly with the Native American legends. As I said, strangely enough, there are many similarities between the various legendary little people and wild men of the Native Americans and the fairy faith of Europe. I have much more on this topic, which could definitely be its own video, including ties to the UFO phenomenon. Organism 46B. This entry refers to a completely fictional story written by C. Michael Forsyth, originally published on his website, Forsyth Stories. Despite this, some people have come under the impression that this story is true and not fictional at all. The story describes how a team of Russian scientists stationed in Antarctica, led by a Dr. Anton Padalka, succeeded in drilling through 2 miles of ice, reaching the underground Lake Vostok, where the monstrous organism 46B was discovered. Quote, "It was in early February 2012 that members of the Russian Antarctic expedition succeeded in drilling through more than 2 miles of thick ice to Lake Vostok, a project that took more than 30 years. Because the freshwater lake has been sealed off from the rest of the world for between 15 and 34 million years, scientists had predicted that they would find new species that had evolved far differently than any seen before. According to our research, the quantity of oxygen there exceeds that on other parts of our planet by 10 to 20 times. Any life forms that we find there are likely to be unique on Earth," Sergei Bulat, the project's chief scientist, said on Russian TV as the geologists were drilling down. Previously, extremely weird creatures had been found in deep-sea vents off the coast of Antarctica, including hairy-chested yeti crabs that feed on gardens of bacteria they cultivate on their bodies, and carnivorous, 7-armed sea stars that catch and kill those crabs. Just as the 8-man team neared the lake, all communication with the outside world mysteriously ceased. As the days crept by and the researchers failed to respond to increasingly frantic efforts to reach them by radio, fellow scientists worldwide feared the worst. No word from the ice for 5 days. Dr. John Priscu, a professor of ecology at Montana State University and head of a similar Antarctic exploration program, grimly told the news at the time. "I can only imagine what it's like." Or maybe he couldn't. Dr. Padalka claims that during this time, he and his colleagues were fighting for their lives in the lost world deep beneath the Earth's surface. "We encountered Organism 46B on day 1 as we were conducting a preliminary dive in our low-temperature wetsuits. It disabled our radio, which we later learned, to our alarm, was intentional. Although the creature has 14 arms instead of the usual 8, it kills in a similar manner to an ordinary octopus, seizing its prey, injecting it with paralyzing saliva, and then dismembering it into small pieces with its beak. But Organism 46B has another trick up its sleeve. It is able to paralyze prey at a distance of up to 150 feet by releasing its venom into the water from an organ similar to its ink sac, explained Dr. Badalka." Unquote. The fictional scientists found that the creature could not only hypnotize people, but could also shapeshift into the form of a human. After the monster kills several of the scientists, they're able to capture it in a tank. Though the story is science fiction, it's definitely interesting to think about what could potentially be lurking in deep underground or subglacial lakes like Lake Vostok. What creatures could have potentially evolved totally isolated from the rest of the organisms on the planet, virtually alien to us? Lake Vostok, for example, could have an environment with conditions similar to ice-covered oceans found on Jupiter's moon Europa. Elves, a term originating in medieval Germanic languages to describe a race of beautiful, supernatural, human-like beings which possess mysterious powers. Much of the lore surrounding elves is nearly interchangeable with beliefs about fairies and other anomalous trickster entities. The word elves originally meant white being. In skaldic verse, the word is used the same way as words for gods. By the end of the medieval period, the word elf was largely replaced by the French word fairy, or the term elementals. Anglo-Saxon elves, like elves in Scandinavia or Ireland, were regarded as people from a parallel world, another dimension, or sometimes beneath the earth or inside of large rocks. Elves and fairies were sometimes believed to mate with mortals, like the gods of old, and some UFO abductions from the modern era, creating hybrid beings. These entities were often accused of kidnapping humans in their sleep and taking them to a strange, alien environment, often believed to be underground or another realm entirely. Elves were believed to have the ability to cause disease in humans, as well as skin rashes, which were referred to as elven puff. Elves were also accused of using poison arrows to paralyze their targets. In medieval Europe, these beings were known to leave mysterious circular areas in the grass, and when one such area was seen, it was said that the elves danced there. According to historian Anne-Marie Hellstrom, quote, "On lake shores where the forest met the lake, you could find elf circles. They were round places where the grass had been flattened like a floor. Elves had danced there. By the lake, I have seen one of those. It could be dangerous, and one could become ill if one had trodden over such a place, or if one destroyed anything there. Today, such a discovery would sooner be attributed to the landing of a UFO than the work of elves." Author and scholar Robert Kirk famously took elves, the Fae, and hidden people very seriously and wrote The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies, one of the most comprehensive books on the various forms of fairy faith. Kirk wrote that elves are, quote, "said to be of a middle nature betwixt man and angel, as were daemons thought to be of old, of intelligent studious spirits, and light changeable bodies, like those called astral, somewhat of the nature of a condensed cloud, and best seen in twilight. These bodies are so pliable through the subtlety of the spirits, that they can make them appear or disappear at pleasure." Some 19th and 20th century scholars attempted to rationalize the widespread beliefs in elves as folk memories of lost indigenous peoples. Since belief in supernatural beings, similar to elves, is ubiquitous in human cultures, scholars no longer believe such explanations are valid. Iceland retains a form of fairy faith to this day. The Icelandic Elf School teaches about their modern form of fairy faith and their 13 classifications of elves. Even modern studies show that around 7 to 8% of Icelanders claim to be certain that elves exist. Depending on the study that you look at, 45 to 54% claim it is likely or possible that elves exist in Iceland. The lead researcher of the 2007 study, Terry Gunnell, stated, quote, "Icelanders seem to be much more open to phenomena like dreaming the future, forebodings, ghosts, and elves than other nations." As Robert Kirk described elves, fairies, demons, and fauns to be cosmologically between man and angels, existing parallel to humans, as many other beings were described by other cultures. Many have drawn parallels to the little people of the Native Americans, or the beliefs in jinn. Many modern reports of psychic phenomena and UFO encounters have similarities to much of this lore. Night visitations by non-human beings, shapeshifters, and another race of dangerous, intelligent beings with anomalous powers haunting the Earth and hybridizing with human beings are all components found in the modern close encounter literature. Jacques Vallée, UFO researcher and scientist, stated, quote, "To find alien abduction parallels in primitive magic, mythology, occultism, and the fairy faith, all one has to do is remove one's blinders and look." Kitsune. The kitsune is a spiritual being from Japanese mythology, sometimes identified as a yokai. They are known as tricksters, possessing paranormal powers such as shapeshifting and bewitching the minds of humans. They were often known for leading travelers astray, often taking the form of a human female. The power of the kitsune was said to be represented by the number of tails it possessed. This made the legendary nine-tailed fox particularly dangerous. The kitsune was also believed to have the ability to possess human beings like many other entities. This was a widespread belief across Japan. It was believed that a shaman or priestess would be needed to exorcise the fox spirit. Sometimes, kitsune were believed to use their magic for benevolent beings, serving as a guardian of a family or a home. Unfortunately for us, one such being may have been recently released into the mortal world. A, quote, killing stone was once a popular tourist attraction in Nikko National Park in Japan. This stone was believed to contain a kitsune called Tamamo no Me for nearly 900 years until it cracked in half in March of 2022. This kitsune was known for a legend about Emperor Toba, who ruled Japan from 1107 to 1123. Nick Kapoor, an associate professor of history, stated, Tamamo no Me was known for her shape-shifting abilities, so she transformed herself into a beautiful woman and caught the eye of the emperor. As she grew closer to the emperor, he fell gravely ill. A court astrologer used divination to determine Tamamo no Me was the culprit. Once her plan was foiled, she fled into the wilderness, changing shapes to try and stay hidden. However, samurai sent after her eventually caught up to the fox spirit. When one of the warriors shot her with an arrow, her physical form was killed, so her spirit was transformed into a stone. Legend goes that if you touch the stone, you die, hence the name Killing Stone. Unquote. With the stone cracked in half, some believed that it was a bad omen and that the kitsune was now released. Ogre. Ogre is a French word derived from Orcus, a Roman and Etruscan god of the underworld. Ogres are known as legendary gigantic humanoid creatures from mythology and folklore around the world. They are commonly linked with stories of giants and human cannibalism. In most tales, ogres are described as being much taller than human beings, very powerful and brutish, and with an insatiable hunger, usually for humans. Sirens. Sirens are commonly described as fish-human hybrids, or sometimes referred to as sea nymphs from ancient Greek mythology, which possess the power to manipulate the human mind with their singing. Sirens first appeared in the Odyssey, which follows the Greek hero Odysseus in the fallout of the Trojan War. At one point, Odysseus is warned of the sirens by Circe. It was said that no man would survive hearing their song, and that many sailors were enchanted by their voices and were lured to their deaths. Odysseus, when passing their island, wanted to hear their song, so he ordered his crew to plug their ears with wax while they tied him to the mast of their ship. Once Odysseus succeeded in hearing the siren's song, the beings were said to have ended their lives. However, in the Odyssey, the sirens are never physically described in detail. The earliest known depictions of the sirens actually represent them as avian rather than aquatic. They were often represented as bird-like, winged humanoid creatures with the head of a human woman. This depiction could still be found by the 7th century, hybrid bird-like creatures with human heads. In later medieval bestiaries, they started to be depicted more aquatic than avian, the iconography which has carried on to the modern day. Charlie. Charlie is one of many nicknames given to an alleged sea serpent said to dwell in Payette Lake in McCall, Ohio. It is also known as the Twilight Dragon of Payette Lake, Slimy Slim, or simply the Payette Lake Monster. According to a 1944 issue of Time magazine, during that summer, over 30 people witnessed the sea serpent. One witness, Thomas L. Rogers, described his sighting to the magazine. Quote, "The serpent was about 50 feet away and going 5 miles an hour with a sort of undulating motion. His head, which resembles that of a snub-nosed crocodile, was 18 inches above the water. I'd say he was 35 feet long. Walter Bowling, the owner of a lakeside resort, told the Payette Star News the same year that he witnessed the creature and described it as having a humped back, similar to a camel. Rogers described the creature as, quote, at least 35 feet long, with a dinosaur-type head, pronounced jaw, humps like a camel, and shell-like skin, unquote. Real estate agent Pauline Miller described her sighting of the creature to the Idaho Statesman. She saw the creature from her office in the Lakeview Motel in 1953. She initially thought the creature was an overturned boat, which is a pattern in sea serpent reports. However, once she got a closer look, running out of her office to the pier, she noticed that there were 3 or 4 indentations in its back, about a foot deep. Quote, it was different from anything that I had ever heard described before. If I had a mind to, I could have jumped on its great, big, shiny back. I was so close. Unquote. Pauline watched the creature for a few more minutes before it descended back into the water. She was disappointed that she never got a look at the creature's head. Pauline describes a somewhat interesting encounter just following the sighting of the serpent. Quote, a woman was sitting on the bank, smoking a cigarette just as calm as can be. I asked her if she just saw a large fish, and she answered, yes, it must weigh tons, and then she described it just as I saw it. She said it must have passed by her 3 or 4 times that afternoon, unquote. The article states that Miller said she didn't think to go back to her office, where a camera was laying on her desk, and take a photograph of the fish, and that she regrets not questioning the strange woman on the bank any further. Quote, I forgot to ask her what kind of head and neck it had. That's something I've always regretted too, unquote. According to a 1977 issue of the Idaho Statesman, in June that year, credible sightings began to occur almost regularly. Quote, on June 12th, Kathleen Milburn and her 15-year-old son, Douglas Crowther, both of McCall, were fishing from their small motorboat anchored just off Cougar Island in the northeast sector of the lake. The fishing had been very good that day, and it wasn't until after 1 p.m. that they said they noticed a wake-like disturbance about 75 yards away. My first impression was that the waves were lapping against some rocks, Milburn said. Then I turned to Doug, and to be quite honest with you, I asked him, what in the hell is that? What we saw were 3 large lumps, moving, cruising from the east shore to the other end. It was astonishing. She estimated the height of the ripples between 12 and 15 inches. The lumps were shiny and black, she said, and visible for about 30 seconds before disappearing underwater. It really looked like 3 great big inner tubes, interconnected, Milburn said. I saw no head, I saw no tail, I saw 3 lumps. 2 weeks later, Donnie Cunningham, Sherry Halligan, and Linda Palmiter, all McCall residents, were sitting on the lakeside deck of the Logjam Cafe eating lunch when they noticed several foot-high waves about 100 yards from the nearby city dock. Protruding 3 or 4 feet out of the otherwise glass-smooth lake and moving swiftly toward the dock was something Palmiter described as big and brown, round like a watermelon. I think I saw it first. There was like a wave out there all by itself, so I just kept watching, and pretty soon, it started moving fast toward the dock. I don't know, it looked like it was pushing something. There was a little white cap up front. I couldn't see a head or tail. We guessed it to be about 30 to 40 feet long. She said it disappeared just before reaching the dock. In 1980, cryptozoologist Gary S. Mengiacopra published a report titled A Preliminary Report of Possible Large Animals in the Payette Lakes of Idaho for Bloomsburg State College, suggesting similarities between Charlie and Champ, the Lake Champlain monster. He also cited Native American legends of an evil spirit said to dwell in the lake, beliefs which long predated the modern sightings of the Payette Lake Monster. The Cerro Azul Monster, also known as the Panama Creature, the Blue Stream Monster, or the Blue Hill Horror, was a bizarre creature encountered near the small town of Cerro Azul, Panama, in September of 2009. A group of teenagers were reportedly hanging out near a cave on the outskirts of town when they came across the creature. One of the teens later told a local news outlet, "I was in the river and I felt something grabbing my legs. We took it out of the water and started throwing rocks and sticks at it. We had never seen anything like that." The creature was pale and hairless, with grotesque features and long arms. The kids were horrified by the creature and stoned it to death. Once they were sure the creature was dead, they tossed its carcass back into the water. Later, the children's parents returned to the area after hearing the accounts of the creature and found it washed up on the shore. The creature has been commonly compared to the Montauk Monster, or Gollum, from Lord of the Rings. 4 days later, the creature's body was collected and an autopsy was performed, confirming that the creature was a brown-throated sloth. Its gruesome appearance was explained as a result of the creature deteriorating underwater. Sheep Squatch, also known as the White Thing, is a bizarre creature mostly reported in the Appalachian region, particularly West Virginia and Kentucky. It is reported to be large and dangerous, the size of a bear with white fur or wool and large horns on its head. The creature allegedly walks bipedally as well as on all fours. It is sometimes described as more canid than hominid, like medieval depictions of demons and many bizarre entities reported today. The Sheep Squatch is said to smell like sulfur. Perhaps the most famous encounter with the Sheep Squatch took place in July of 2004. Dakota Cheeks, Ricky Joyce, and Ricky's dog embarked on a hunting trip to a cabin owned by Ricky's family in a remote area of Breckinridge County, Kentucky. The Joyce family's cabin was surrounded by over 100 acres of forest. They brought multiple ATVs with them and planned to use the cabin as their base of operations. On the very first morning of their trip, they were surprised to find that one of Ricky's dogs had gone missing without a trace. Dakota and Ricky went searching for the animal, calling and whistling for it. Eventually, they stumbled across the dog lying in a ditch. It was obvious to the men that the dog was dead. Something had twisted her canine skull completely backwards. Cheeks stated, "There's no animal up here that can grab an animal by its chin and the back of its head and twist it. You know, no coyote can do it, there's no bear, as far as I know, up here." Confused and disgusted by the fate of the dog, their attention was soon drawn to powerful growls and roars coming from the hilltop. The men took their ATVs and decided to investigate, reasoning that whatever was roaring in the distance could be the murderer of Ricky's dog. Quote, "We decided we were gonna hop on the four-wheelers and stake out the hilltop. We ended up going to the far side of the property where nobody really goes. There are no trails. We make a couple laps around the field. That way, we can both easily see where the four-wheeler has been, so we know where to look." Unquote. They spent the rest of the day searching for whatever killed the dog, but found nothing. At nightfall, they decided to return to their campsite. At 5 a.m., Ricky's remaining dogs began barking wildly before running away. Dakota and Ricky could hear what sounded like incredibly powerful footsteps around them before something began to shake their entire camper. Quote, "It literally sounded like all hell was breaking loose. It's almost like you can hear something pressing up against the side and you can kind of hear the tent start to bend. Just that weird, eerie metal sound." Soon, the creature abruptly stopped and they heard it walk away. After a few minutes, the two of them decided to chase down the creature, bringing their guns with them. Again, they spent most of the day and evening searching for the creature. Soon after dusk, Rick and Dakota were still searching for the creature as they passed through a cemetery. On the other side, they entered a large field where Rick finally laid eyes on the creature. Quote, "I'd seen something standing in the field, and at first I thought it was a tree. It was tall, but it was also kind of hunched over a little bit. It was big, it was white. Its arms were long, and they had these long talons. It was too big to be a person. When it was on two legs, it stood at least 9 feet tall. I mean, it was massive. When it noticed us, it let out this just ungodly, gut-curling growl. It came straight at us. They shot at the creature while trying to drive away from it as fast as possible. Eventually, they were able to reach the cabin safely, and they never saw the creature again." Rick would later state in an interview, "I've been in some pretty scary situations, but most situations, you know what you're dealing with. On that one, I didn't, so I didn't know how to react. That's quite possibly the scariest moment in my life. It made me believe the unbelievable. I didn't believe in myths. I didn't believe in wives' tales. None of that until I saw that, and after that it changed my life forever. I mean, there are things out there and we don't know what they are." Unquote. Dakota also stated in a later interview, "As a kid, you're not really sure what's in the dark. Once you see what's just beyond the light is when you realize that all your innocence is gone."